All right, welcome everyone once again to Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine. I'm joined together again with Cheryl Chumley, the opinion editor, online opinion editor for Washington Times. Welcome, Cheryl. Thank you for joining me again today.
It's great to be with you, Don.
All right, so there's always lots of stuff on the news, right? It's not that news cycle is not dying under Joe Biden. But I want to start off with this Georgia election voting law, all this kerfuffle and the backlash and everything like this. This thing has snowballed really. And in all my years, I've seen a lot of lying by Democrat politicians, liberal politicians, the media. But I don't know, this one may just about take the cake in my lifetime for, what has been going on here. The amount of misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it, on this law and the effect it's had on Major League Baseball, the corporations in Atlanta, it's shocking to me. I mean, what's going on here?
Well, the blowback from it it's a note of optimism to me, because corporations have been doing this sort of social justice, racial justice, environmental justice slow dance for some years now, and it's really sped up in recent times. It's sped up under Barack Obama. It took a sort of hiatus under Donald Trump, and now it's back in full force under Joe Biden, especially under the coronavirus. And so we're seeing a lot of corporations come forward and act like they are the sort of unelected policymakers for America. And actually, this has blown up in their face. I'm very happy to see this, because I think a lot of Americans who maybe weren't aware of how corporations were taking over government policy, the government's job, specifically the legislator's job, their eyes are wide open now. And Americans don't like this. Americans don't like being told by companies, by corporations, by the private sector, that what they're doing in terms of government policy is wrong. And so I agree with you that this has probably been a huge misstep, and you're seeing even the White House now back off from it. You're seeing Jen Psaki put forward the idea that, well, President Joe Biden never wanted Major League Baseball to leave Georgia. He just wanted to draw attention to it. So they know how damaging this is to their cause. And I have to say, I'm a little bit happy at the outcome right now.
I like that. I mean, I actually like this take on that in terms of that, to turn that around, and because there is a lot of negativity on this, right? I mean, Republicans, everybody, conservatives blasting the decision, but I like this this vein of optimism here on that, and I think you're right. I mean, this is probably the way we really should be looking at this. This is a massive misstep. I think, to follow up on your words, I think this is a massive misstep on their part. The corporations, they have shareholders that they are beholden to, in theory, but they seem to right now have separated themselves from that responsibility of doing what's in their shareholders' best interest. I mean, what Delta and what Coke and the others are, doing it, taking this platform on and just really caving into the social justice wars, the liberal left. Corporations have always been very sensitive to race and to gender. So they've always been, it's very easy to go and get them to do things your way, especially from the liberal left, when they just put enough pressure on them. But who are they serving at this point in time? I mean, Americans, there's a large number of Americans that own shares in these companies, either directly or indirectly through mutual funds or other vehicles. And now I begin to wonder about, whether or not conservatives should be taking a bigger stand on, voting with their dollars and not owning some of these corporations, but also whether or not they want to buy these products. I think this is more of a negative for them, in terms of sales and public relations, than it is a positive by caving into these woke leftists.
Right, I agree. Conservatives should take a stronger stand. But to go back to what you just asked a couple minutes ago, who are they serving? Well, it's interesting you asked that question because I've done some research into what's going on here with the corporate world. And if you look at the larger picture, the Great Reset, that's a phrase that I'm sure many of your watchers have heard of. What it is, it's a policy of the World Economic Forum, which is a private entity. It's not government run, though it is a globalist-minded entity. And so the World Economic Forum has put on its own website this game plan to use the coronavirus to bring about a new definition of capitalism around the world, which basically targets America, because America, of course, has the freest markets pretty much in the world. And so when you're talking about redefining capitalism, you're hitting hard at the engine of America's growth. And how the World Economic Forum wants to redefine capitalism, they want to take it out of the hands of the shareholders and they want to put it in the hands of the stakeholders. So what they want to do is make capitalism less profit driven and more social justice driven. And what that means is you're going to find more and more corporations putting aside considerations for profits and revenues instead, and taking up the social justice causes. And we've seen this over the last few months. There are several corporations, 181 of them, in fact, in America, who've signed on to this new business roundtable type of social justice corporate business practicing. And what's going to happen is we're going to have more Coca-Cola companies telling us and training employees to be less white. We're going to have more Home Depot companies telling us that their number one cause now is not making money, but to bring forward racial justice into America. We're going to have more battles with Major League Baseball and other corporations around the nation than we've ever faced before. And it's just important for Americans to realize this is not just individual corporations seeing a problem that is truthfully taking root in America, inherent racism, that kind of thing. It's coming from above. It's coming from the World Economic Forum. And these companies and corporations in America have signed on to this pledge that the WEF has put forward to put social justice before profits.
That's amazing. I mean, but that's not surprising, I guess, either. In terms of the way things have been going. I mean, I'll even throw in things that are kind of maybe more subliminal in a way. As a lot of reports about how these companies are, as they think about environmental concerns, they're going to look. A lot of them are going to put labeling on their labeling. They're going to kind of put like little facts and figures about how much of an impact this bottle of ketchup has on the carbon footprint or something like that. It's like this is great. It's like, so now I can't just read the ingredients if I'm concerned about the ingredients, but I'm also going to get an environmental message. By the way, so by buying this bottle of Heinz ketchup, I've created this much of a carbon footprint, and creating more of these environmental wars, where nothing is really acceptable. I mean, we're in that age range in general of where we have just seen this massive change, from corporations on the environment, on packaging, on solar energy, wind energy, and things like that, which is not necessarily always the best method for them. I mean, there's a cost to that they don't talk about, but it's, it seems like it's the greater good. And so it's like, it sounds good, right? It's to be green, to be, active on climate change and things like that. That's what everybody seems to want, or that's what they think that people want. So they go down that path, but there's a cost to that nobody really talks about.
Well, the problem with signing on to a larger body's push for social justice and socially conscious ways of doing business, the problem with that is that you're not doing it as a company. You're not doing it based on your own desire, based on your own belief in that actual cause. You're doing it because you feel pressured to do it. And when you sign up to a system that put something other than money, than revenues, as the priority for your business, you're stepping outside the free market. You're stepping outside the pure capitalistic system, and you're actually stepping into a deceptive territory, because the beauty of capitalism is that it's pure, it's honest, you don't produce something that I want, and so to buy it, I give you an actual real value, a dollar value to purchase it. And there's a beauty in that transaction because it's open, it's transparent, it's honest. When you start throwing social justice and environmental justice and all these far leftist, socialist, communist, Marxist type causes into the mix, it takes it out of the pure market, the free market, the honest market, and it brings in all these far leftist agendas that now convolute and cloud the process. And this works to the far left's advantage, because then they're able to pick and choose who wins, who has the biggest and best and brightest social justice package takes front and center. And it doesn't necessarily mean the companies with the best products, the most ingenious products, the best made products win.
Yeah, I mean, in this kind of like in this whole fight for 15 type of thing like that, I mean, it completely distorts the market. You have basically the Amazon, Walmarts, Targets, whatever, a lot of the bigger retail chains. They seem to be in a race to outdo each other, as if, paying somebody $15 an hour versus $14 an hour makes it a better place to work. That's, that's not true. I mean, it used to be kind of like how you were saying, there was, for workers, it's like, Target was willing to say, okay, I will pay you $10 an hour to do this. If you want to accept it, fine. If you don't, fine, I'll find someone else. Now it seems to be that the pressure is that the social justice warriors on the left are saying, no, you have to pay everybody a minimum $15 and preferably more, and then also give them all these other benefits. But they've completely distorted the market, with this. It's now a race of this other measure. It's not really, a corporation really doesn't operate looking at what's best for the corporation anymore, per se, and the shareholders. It's now dealing with all this other stuff, which impacts them.
And it also opens the door for these kind of strange partnerships between government and private business. For instance, under the coronavirus, we saw millions of stimulus dollars fly out the windows to businesses that the government chose, that the government determined based on their own perceptions needed money more than others. And so if you're a company and you see that the Democrats are in charge on Capitol Hill, which they are, you are going to be more prone to taking up this social justice rally call as a business in order to open the doors to receive tax dollars for your business. So suddenly profits don't even matter as much to you as a business owner, because you're pleasing your corporate, you're pleasing your government partners, you're pleasing the left. And as so long as they keep funneling tax dollars your way, you don't have to worry about consumers liking your product or buying your product. You only have to keep worrying about keeping up the social justice rally call.
Yeah, they're very good. All right. One more thing about this Georgia thing, and is, in terms of the massive, misstep they have on here, is just that they've taken the Major League, baseball, removed the All-Star game from Atlanta and moved it to Denver, Colorado. Colorado's voting laws are really not tremendously different to begin with than Georgia's anyway. And you've now moved it from a city that is mostly black to a city that's mostly white.
I know.
And you're affecting businesses and people that, to me, seem to be much more the base for Joe Biden than, say, Denver. I mean, Denver's liberal, but Atlanta, I mean, give me a break. I mean, so, you have Stacey Abrams and John Ossoff that are kind of like, oops, I think, something's wrong here.
Yeah, I loved how Rand Paul called out Stacey Abrams as basically the one at fault for losing all this. What is it? 100 million estimated for this state. And you're right. It's a little bit hilarious this way. You take it out from a city that was, minorities dominate the population there, and put it in this practically all white city. And no wonder Joe Biden is running scared from this misstep.
Right, and then just to finally, top it off is that, so as you were mentioning, they're trying to figure out a way to run away from that. And then they asked the question about Augusta, about the Masters, which is starting and this week. And, he says, well, that'll be up to them. But there's no way in heck they would ever try to move the Masters. The Masters is Augusta, Georgia. That is it. You don't put the Masters anywhere else. The All-Star game is like a lot of All-Star games in professional sports. It's moved around the country. It's awarded several years in advance, so sites have a chance to make preparations to handle the influx. But I don't think they really wanted to go down there. I mean, that opened up a can of worms that they really didn't foresee, and I think they really, really regret doing what they've done here in this regard.
Yeah, and moving the Masters would be akin to moving like the Kentucky Derby. I mean,
oh yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, I was trying to think of another sporting event, but yeah, you don't take the Kentucky Derby. Yeah, let's move the Kentucky Derby to Nashville or something.
Right.
It won't work. All right. The border crisis is, we talked about this before. It's still not going away. I think we're all waiting to see where Vice President Harris is. I thought she was supposed to kind of help direct this whole idea and help try to figure out what to do there, but we haven't heard a peep from her. At least I haven't heard a peep from her. We still have this problem. I saw there was a video from, I think it was on Fox News this morning, of a 10-year-old who slept in the desert, and he's totally lost. The people who brought him, over abandoned him, and he needed help. I mean, this is still a big problem, and the Biden administration is doing all they can, I think, to separate themselves from this crisis. They're trying to figure out a way. It's like, how do we do this? And then there's also this other report that potentially, and maybe you can shed some more light on about this, is that they're going to go ahead and maybe plug some of the gaps in the wall, but they're not actually going to halt all the work. Some of the work has been funded, so they have to kind of complete it anyway, and they're going to go ahead and put some more fencing and some wall up.
Yeah, it's interesting to go to Kamala Harris first. The vice president, I guess she did resurface after what I think it was 12 days of silence. Nobody knew where she was. Where's Waldo? Where's Kamala Harris? That kind of thing going on in the press. And it was great fun to read the headlines. But she did pop up over the weekend. I guess she had Easter celebration in her hometown and hung out with Gavin Newsom in California for a time, maybe had some Easter ham together. But as far as addressing the border and letting American citizens know about the risk level there, we still haven't learned from officially this administration what's going on. We do see, like you said, the video of that horrible video of the 10-year-old boy abandoned and crying, and the Border Patrol agent trying the best apparently to help him out. But as for what's actually taking place at the border, it's still by and large a big question mark. And you're right, I saw reports as well. The Washington Times actually reported that now the administration is going to plug some of the holes in the wall. That's, I guess, the PR approved language of saying they're going to continue building the wall that Donald Trump built. They just don't want to use that language because, of course, voters, enough time hasn't passed yet between administrations, voters will make the connection. Hey, isn't that what Donald Trump campaigned on? Build the wall, and did. So they have to kind of reshape and refashion the language and rhetoric, but quietly they have to put something in the wall to keep these scores of illegals from flowing across, because I think when Kamala Harris went down there, she was probably shocked by what she saw, that it was even worse than the reports that she had heard up on Capitol Hill, because there's something going on at the border that is even worse than this administration wants to admit. Otherwise, they, at the very least, would be putting out little press statements and daily reports assuring Americans that it wasn't that bad, but they're not even taking that small step.
Yeah, and they can't fight, the statistics that come out that, the monthly stats about how many border crossings there are and arrests and apprehensions, all these kind of things that are skyrocketing, or I guess the arrests under Biden have now dropped dramatically than under Trump administration as well. So they're not technically arresting people, but they are letting them in, and but they've just got these scores of people that keep coming. Joe Biden, I mean, he opened that up for them. That people thought that he was going to be the guy that would let everybody in, and he didn't disabuse them of that notion until fairly recently. He says, don't come, but it's a little bit too late to tell people don't come. And how many people are going to believe that? Because they're not really doing anything at the border at this point. They're just trying to find beds for people. They've got this humongous problem with all these unaccompanied minors. This is a disaster, and it's hurting him in the polls, at least on that issue. I mean, his approval rating has just dropped, like a stone, and that's not a good thing for them. I look at it and I keep looking at 2022. Biden has got to, he's got to get a hold of this for the Democrat Party. They have got to figure out, he's got to come up with something that works or is cohesive, because he's got a lot of, Democrats in Congress that, a lot of people, just like, every congressional election, there are always people who squeak by, and those that, that barely won, they could be right on the bubble, and they could lose their seats in 2022 if Biden doesn't fix this to a good degree.
Yeah, he may have dropped in the polls a bit among some voting segments here in America, but his polls are just surging in the Northern Triangle. El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, they love him. They absolutely adore Biden. And this, I say this tongue in cheek because, of course, El Salvador is the homicide capital of the world, and people from those points are moving up through Mexico and trickling into America's borders. And this administration is doing nothing but turning blind eyes to it, pretending as if they're sending the vice president down there to get a handle on things, and yet she disappears for almost 2 weeks, and we still don't know what's going on. Though we do have that report from the New York Post just yesterday or the day before that said that 2 terror suspects were arrested at the border by the FBI, a 33-year-old man and a 25-year-old man on terror watch lists. And so this should be a concern, not just to conservatives in America, but Democrats too, because of course, terrorists don't discriminate based on political party when it comes to enacting their terrorist crimes.
Yeah, I mean, for up to this point in time, I mean, how do you rate the media's coverage of this issue, of this crisis at this point?
Yeah, it's definitely a 2, with 0 to 10, 10 being amazing and 0 being the absolute horrible, most deceptive. And the media has not done a good job. Actually, Senator Ted Cruz and his gang of dozen who went down there have done a very good job of trying to give to the American people some truths going on at the border. But the media in general, they've done a little bit pushback, which is why I give a 2, not a 0. You've seen NBC kind of push and pressure Jen Psaki to open the border, open up the border for reporters to go down there and ask questions unfettered of Border Patrol agents, but that just isn't happening. And let me put it to you like this. If this was the Donald Trump administration right now, and this was the treatment this was what was taking place on the border, the NBC, CNNs, ABC, CBSs would be doing nonstop coverage of the untransparency, for lack of a better word, of the Donald Trump administration to give insights into what's happening at the border. The fact that we're only hearing now and again from CNN and NBC asking why they can't have unfettered access, that's not doing the American people what the media watchdog is supposed to do.
Yeah, that's good, because they gave me some hope that when they were doing some of the pushback about not getting to see what was going on there, especially after those pictures and reports about kids in cages type of thing were far worse right now than they have ever really been. But it seems that they did a little bit of that, but they haven't really gone any further with that. And I think you're right. I mean, look, if this had been the Trump administration, these guys, they would have crews camped out down there doing things, and they're just giving us intermittent reports, and they're kind of like, well, we're pushing this down a little bit. It's also not good optics for Biden, so we probably shouldn't push too hard on this. At this point in time, we can focus on the topic we talked about before. We can focus on Georgia and the racism in Georgia. That'll be better. The Biden administration can still look halfway decent on that, but he looks terrible on the border. Back on the media too, I wanted to ask you about this thing that Lester Holt in his little her narrative or essay, and where one of the things he had said in there was just that fairness is overrated. He talked about a lot more things in there, but it just kind of he got attacked for it, and he also got support for it as well. But I mean, being someone who's been in the media for a long time, I mean, what's with Lester Holt? I mean, what's he trying to do here? Is he trying to be honest that the media basically, we don't really care about fairness?
Yeah, it kind of strikes me as, wow, somebody's being honest that works in the mainstream media, that they're coming out and acknowledging in full truth that being fair and balanced doesn't really matter to them. Here's my opinion, though, on it. I'm a little bit ambivalent on I guess any kind of uproar generated with what Lester Holt said. And here's why. It doesn't bother me at all. It doesn't bother me a bit if the media is biased. The only thing that bothers me is when they try to pretend as if they're not. I could care less if CNN is far left. I could care less if NBC is a spokesperson for the Socialist Party of America. Just don't try and deny it. Don't try and act as if you're middle of the road, and don't try and act as if you're presenting all views just because you get Mitt Romney to come on and speak on behalf of conservatives, knowing full well that Mitt Romney is a Democrat in disguise. That's the thing that irks me, when the media tries to pretend as if it's unbiased, knowing full well behind closed doors that they're anything but.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I think that's what we all should be looking at here, is that, we kind of by and large know what positions the media is going to take on these issues. But it is this hiding effect, type of thing like that. My father used to grill the late Katharine Graham at the Washington Post shareholders meetings, talk about, what conservatives, work at the Post. And she says, "Oh, we have several." And he's like, "Can you name one, or can you name it?" Which she always refused to do. But they would never, they would always deny that they were a liberal newspaper at the same point. But they would never say, "By the way, we have conservatives, and they're working here. Here are the people that are in the that do op-eds, or here are people that are on the editorials, all these kind of things. And here's some of our reporters that we know are conservatives." They would never tell you, which always led you to the fact that it's like the conclusion is like, you can't tell us because you really don't have any, right?
Right.
But you're trying to tell the public, you're trying to tell your readers that you are in essence a fair and balanced. You're reporting objectively, which we know you're not. But they would never admit it. I mean, it took the New York Times, some of their former ombudsmen, when they were on the way out, when their contracts were up, to talk about how liberal the paper was, the thing the paper wouldn't admit. But the ombudsman, who was paid by the paper, but now that their contract was basically up and they were turning it over to somebody else, almost was like the shackles were now loosened, and they could say, "By the way, this paper has got a liberal bent."
Yeah. And you know what, Don, here's what they hide behind. And I know this firsthand from working up through the years through, community journalism. And I also know it from reading Pew Research reports. They hide behind the fact that they say, well, I'm an independent. I'm registered independent. So I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent. Well, that's fine and dandy. But if you look at the causes they support, it's all far left. Bring up gay marriage in a newsroom and watch how 95% of the reporters there are in favor of gay marriage. Bring up any cause of far left liberal causes, socialist causes even, and 90% of the newsroom is in favor of the leftist slant of that. And where this really trickles down into today's harm for Americans hoping just to get a broad view of the news to make up their own minds, it's when you go to social media, it's when you go to, say, Google News, and you try and find a whole bunch of different stories based on one topic so you can decide. Well, the analytics there and the watchdogs that they have on social media, they appoint people like the New York Times and the Washington Post to decide whether something meets the smell check of facts or not. They're the fact checkers. But someone like a Fox News, or God forbid, a Breitbart, or another obviously right-leaning main news organization is not included in that fact-checking process. And if they are, it's on a 10-to-1 basis or a 100-to-1 basis. And so the news that gets filtered into your social media pages, when you click on your own news feeds, they're fact-checked by the far leftists that don't admit that they're far leftists. So that to me is the bigger problem with biased news these days.
All right. One last thing on bias I just got to ask you about, which is 60 Minutes and Ron DeSantis.
They did a huge favor for the incoming president, Ron DeSantis. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, the thing is that it was such a hit job, a hatchet job, and they doubled down on this. And the thing, having worked in this area for a long time, and we had cases going back, 30 some years ago with 60 Minutes and with people who were trying to sue them and, talk about things that they had done wrong, how they had just twisted and distorted the facts in a 60 Minutes report. People have got to realize that maybe this is going to be a way to blow the lid off of it a little bit. It's just that, you see 15 to 18 minutes roughly of footage in a 60 Minute segment, but they have actually filmed an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours or more. They film a lot more, and then they edit it down for that segment. So there's a lot of stuff left behind. And what we've seen, and this is happening again here, is that you edit it down. They're calling it for clarity, but it's how they do it, so they put things out of context, and then you get a completely different distorted point of view. And good for DeSantis for standing up, to all of this. And 60 Minutes, I think they're taking a real beating. I mean, when you have, what was it, the mayor of Palm Beach, I guess it was. I mean, he goes on Fox News and said, no, they're wrong. I mean, he says, I talked to Ron DeSantis about this whole thing. So when Democrats start to come out and defend Ron DeSantis, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And honestly, it's almost like CBS thought it was still in the heyday of the 3 major news channels, and that's all you had. As if people don't have access to the internet and scores of social media. And, it just doesn't make sense for something like 60 Minutes to behave this way and really not believe that it's going to get outed for its deceptive practices.
Yeah, I mean, in this day and age with social media, with all these things that people can check and they clip and they can do, it's not like it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I mean, it's very different. So yeah, it's just I don't know. I don't know about this. Is to me, it's a black eye for CBS and 60 Minutes, but I'm not sad.
No, I'm not sad either. Happy face. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Thank you once again for joining me, Cheryl. This is great discussion, and hopefully we can do it again next week. All right, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us today. We'll see you around next week.